So today's a very special day. It's the Rebbe's 23rd.
Watch just stopped.
2:25.
Yeah, I see that.
What is he taking in? The capital T in which number?
116.
Once we can do that also.
Okay. So we're coming to the end of speech. So today we'll hopefully we'll finish it. And what we'll do today is we'll talk about the gratitude, which is the last aspect of speech that we need to speak about. And then, once we're done with the gratitude, we'll talk about they're called two kolelim. The foundation and the kingdom, Yesod and Malchut, they're actually, what happened to you? Oh, are you okay? Yeah, okay. It works? So we'll get to the two kolelim. Kolelim means to include. So most of the time, Yesod and Malchut, they work together in such a way that they include the rest of what's above them. So the Yesod is sort of like the clearinghouse for everything that came before, all the different types of speech that we've been talking about. And then the Yesod passes it on to the Malchut. So we'll talk about that also, how that actually appears in speech itself. Okay, so let's begin with the gratitude. So gratitude is without doubt the one that's worst by everybody. And unfortunately, I think we talked about this before, if you've had any kind of training in Torah Nefesh, so you feel that maybe gratitude is not a good thing, right? Because that's sort of like how we teach it, that if a person is looking for sipuk, for a feeling of contentment, to be content with what they've done, to feel that they can take credit for it. So they're actually fishing for a good word about what they did. That's the negative aspect of gratitude as it appears in me, the person looking for it. So if I'm looking for my wife to acknowledge the fact that I cleaned the kitchen when she was asleep, when she wakes up and it's a clean kitchen, she's very happy. And it's not enough for me that she's happy, but I have to actually hear her acknowledge it. That's the shattering of my hod, of my thanksgiving. That's the worst. It's also the most vulnerable, because that's where I feel that I get my self-affirmation, like how I affirm my own existence. And when I need it from somebody else, I can break. It can actually break me if I don't get what I need. And if I would have to point to something that causes people the most anguish in life and the most broken relationships and disharmony between couples and everything that goes together with everything psychological in a person's life, I would have to point to that people are expecting to receive acknowledgement for what they've done. And if they don't get the acknowledgement, it's over. And the main thing is not so much even that they're angry at the person who didn't give it to them, as much as they lose their sense of being, like their sense of importance in the world.
If we get the ego thing down, we don't get this with it.
And this, so if you have to point at where does the ego hit you the hardest,
Right.
That's where it is, in that place. So that has to be rectified. A person if you want to have a good life, I'm not talking about now, even about whether it's right or wrong, whether it's a good thing to want to have others acknowledge what you've done or not. If you are dependent on somebody else's acknowledgement, you're setting yourself up for pain. That's just how it is. On the other hand, the way that it's usually dealt with by most people is that okay, if you're not going to acknowledge me, I'm not going to do anything. Right? It becomes that if I can't get the sipuk, the feeling of self-affirmation that I'd like from other people, then I'm not willing to extend myself in any way. I'm not willing to invest in anything because I don't get what I wanted anyway. And that's a double whammy because both you're not getting the acknowledgement, and more importantly, the only real type of affirmation that a person can do is to extend themselves, is to do things for other people. Really, that's the only way that you can feel that you have a place in the world. So if you're waiting for the acknowledgement and you don't get it, and then, so that's strike one, and then because of that you decide, well, I'm never going to do anything for this person, and then it becomes eventually for everybody. You disengage from society, from your relationships. That's strike two, and unfortunately here, you only need 2 strikes really to get out, and you're mamish in a world of pain, because. Hold on. So first of all, just to understand this concept that acknowledgement, hod, is the most vulnerable of all the sfirot, and that's called Hodine Pachalai Lemashchit. It's a verse from Daniel. Hodine Pachalai Lemashchit. That my hod, my acknowledgement, has turned into my worst enemy.
What was the context?
The context there is that he's praying, and they find out. So it's a whole story. It's not exactly. When it was taken in Chassidut, it was sort of taken out of context. It's not the exact context there. But the point is that the word is the same, the hodi, the my hod. Amazingly, one of the best ways to translate this word hod, which we don't do so much, certainly not around Rav Ginsburg, but in the past, years ago, he used to do this. He used to say that hod, one of the simplest ways to explain it is charisma. You ever hear that? You haven't heard that. Even being around so long. So it's a very important concept that charisma really is this very vulnerable aspect of our psyche when it's strong. If you strengthen it, if you strengthen your hod, your acknowledgement, that's exactly where charisma comes from.
Then it's
A
not.
charismatic person is like somebody who doesn't need your acknowledgement. Think about it. What does it mean to be charismatic? It's like a person who is so self-assured, they have so much standing in where they are, they so much believe in who they are and where they are, that they don't need to receive any kind of affirmation from somebody else. So it could be ego, but it could be, if it's rectified, that I simply don't need that gratitude. I don't need.
Right.
Sorry?
Great Rabbanim can be in that place.
But
Can-
they don't have charisma. They're just kind of.
Why not? It could be charisma. So I'm giving a new explanation for what charisma is. Charisma is somebody who doesn't need you to affirm his being. He already has it. And where did he get it from? It's not because he aggrandizes himself. That's not charisma. That you right away sense as somebody who's self-aggrandizing. Charisma is that he doesn't have to say anything to himself. He just feels it. And it's not by chance that this is associated with the left foot. Right? And the left foot is the most vulnerable place in the body. The left foot is where Yaakov Avinu was hurt by Esav's angel. His archangel. If you need gratitude for everything that you do, no. If you need it, you're vulnerable. If you're able to strengthen your hod, your acknowledgement to the point where you don't need it, and you can affirm your own existence from yourself, and more importantly, you act, you extend yourself without requiring that feedback from the people around you, that is charisma. That's like a definition of what charisma is. And really, think about it, it's self-assurance. Really, that's what it feels like. Yes, people don't have to speak. It's not necessarily that they speak. In fact, I would say that most people that are charismatic are not necessarily big speakers.
Because I'm thinking of charismatic leaders. They're
It
not-
could be a leader, but like you have you know, I don't know, you're working in some place I once knew, like Martin Marietta in America, and there's a lot of good engineers, and then there's these ones that they're like a notch above everybody else. They don't have to say anything. It's just how they do their work. It's quiet work. It doesn't have to be with a lot of fanfare. Even they don't get any fanfare, but everybody knows, like, this is something else. So this is a very common thing that people reach this. So Miriam Rhodes sends us her blessings from the Rebbe's oil. So hopefully she can. If she's waiting in line, I don't know if she's waiting in line already. Is there a line already?
Yeah, usually.
Now 7 o'clock?
What, all night?
All night? Yeah.
So charisma is the rectification?
Right, of the hood, the
So
acknowledgement.
what's someone who's like that, and then when they're not strong is what?
So
They
that
don't need acknowledgement from people. That's not what happens.
would rather.
People who don't need the acknowledgement,
Right.
when they're not strong, what is it that they are?
Ah.
They don't become people that need acknowledgement.
No, I think that they do less. They do. They're not able to extend themselves as much as they can. Extending yourself, I mean by like going out of yourself to do for others, and that's really what charisma. In fact, usually when I think about charisma, I don't think about people who speak. Speech can be a form of charisma, but for some reason I usually associate it with quiet people. I don't know why.
Who's the Octan?
What?
Charisma in the Torah. Who's that Octan?
So one of the strongest, very interestingly, I think the one maybe it's so strong that first of all Aaron, because he's the left leg, he's the hood.
You just don't see him getting much acknowledgement, and he's just...
So you see that he's constantly extending himself, and you see that when he passes away, which is in this week's parsha actually, so everybody laments him for a long time. Unlike even Moshe Rabbeinu, who not everybody laments. No, because Moshe is the right leg. It's something different, and they have to work in conjunction. But really, Aaron had that ability to go out of his way to help other people, and not to require. In the end, he was in the background. He didn't need them to come and give him a party after they got together again. You know, there was a couple that was separated or whatever. He didn't need that type of acknowledgement in any way. It was very, in the same way, when you think about it, his beginning is that he's the leader of the Jewish people in Egypt, and then suddenly Moshe Rabbeinu, his brother, shows up, and he takes second violin, right? He's secondary to him, and he doesn't get any of the acknowledgement. And Hashem, there is a lot of discussion about this in the Medrash, about how many times Hashem addressed them both together, how many times he addressed Aaron separately, 11 times that he addressed them together, a few times that he addressed them separately. In any case, but he takes a secondary, like a backseat driver type of position, and he never says anything about it. You never, v'samach b'libo, and you see this amazing thing that he's very happy with it where he is. So if there's anything that you need to work on, that would be the tool to rectifying the ego, to being able to control our egos, that's the spot, the acknowledgement. Now, taking all of this and transporting it to marriage. So, in marriage, I wanted to, before we do that, I wanted to mention one other person other than Aaron. He's chaotically charismatic. He's a figure who's the Reb Tzadok of Lublin. He calls him the Mashiach of Tov. He was a redeemer of the Jewish people, but he was entirely chaotic. Like, it wasn't normal the way he acted. But he's a tremendously charismatic figure, and this is Shimshon, right? Samson. Why? First of all, it's very interesting that he's lame. He can't use either foot.
Shimshon is lame?
He walked on sticks, it says. He wasn't able to. So you've got this very strange character. And the charisma came out, and we've mentioned this sometimes, that the Medrash says that he never ever allowed anybody to do anything for him. He was entirely self-sufficient. It's a very strange story that my wife just heard from Manis Friedman, from the Rebbe, that there was somebody, I don't remember how it happened, there was a way, she told me how it happened, but I don't remember. He became a quadriplegic, and he was one of Bob Dylan's best friends. Anybody know who this is about? You heard this story? So for years he lived in New York, and every time that Bob Dylan would come to New York, he'd go out with him and he'd take him, and he was always backstage in his shows or whatever. And they were very good. They grew up together, right? Something happened.
With him when he had the accident. They were at a high school camp together, and he did a dive or something.
Right. The dive. And there was not enough water. Right. There was not enough water. He broke his spinal column, I guess. Anyway, so for years he had this great relationship with Bob Dylan. And then, for whatever the reason was, this I didn't get either, he went to the Rebbe once. I guess for dollars. I'm not sure how he met the Rebbe.
Dylan?
No, this quadriplegic. And the Rebbe told him, because it's short, so I guess it was like in dollars. I can't imagine how it would be otherwise. He told him, make sure that you don't depend on anybody. And he was blown away and obviously very angry. Like, how could you tell me something like this? What are you talking about? I can't feed myself. What do you mean not to be dependent on anybody? And so the story was that a few months later, I don't know exactly what happened, they had a falling out, he and Dylan. And it turned out that he didn't know how dependent he was on that relationship giving him a place in the world. And to say that the Rebbe foresaw, didn't foresee exactly what crossed his mind when he said that, but he, after the falling out, this man fell into deep depression also. I don't know how he wasn't depressed until then, but I guess until then that was holding him in some way. And once it was over, he mamish fell into deep depression. And then he remembered, a few weeks later, remembered what the Rebbe told him. And it suddenly inspired him that, wait a minute, that if somebody could look at me and say that I can not be dependent, obviously he's not stupid. He sees that I'm dependent on people for other things, so he must have meant something else. Maybe he meant not to take my meaning, the meaning of my life, from somebody else, not to live vicariously through somebody else. And that's a tremendous lesson. And that's what it means to heal the acknowledgement. That you don't need anybody else to give you your place in the world. Rather, you give your place in the world to yourself. Hashem gives it to you. But it comes to you through your own work. Meaning that you do because it's important for you to do. That's what it means to be alive. That's what it means to have a place in the world. And you could say that that's where the ego fights the hardest. I mean, because it wants us, somebody didn't smile at me the right way, didn't say the right words, and I did this for them, and I did that for them, and look at how much they're smiling at somebody else, and look at how much they're having a good time with somebody else, or whatever, and you feel left out, and you feel, I went to an American high school, so that's like the number one thing that you feel in high school. Then when you get to college, it's a lot easier because you can go to the library and just stick your neck inside the books and that's it. But when you're in high school, it's all about that social scene. And it breaks your hood, it breaks your acknowledgement to such an extent that it's a wonder if you can ever rebuild it afterwards. But that's how Western society built the high schools. So really, it requires a lot of thought. Tremendous. It leads to jealousy, but most of all, it takes you out of the world. It doesn't give you a place to stand. And when you think about hod, acknowledgement as being your left foot, so you understand what it means that you need it to stand. Right? You can't stand on one foot forever. You need 2 feet. So the one foot could be the right foot, the things that I do, and so on. But the left foot is the feeling that regardless of how much I've done, I don't need the acknowledgement. I can stand on my own foot. I don't need somebody else to put that crutch under my left foot. My left foot is strong enough to hold me by itself.
But even so, when you think about walking, it's that you can only take that right foot ahead with the left foot.
Right. Also.
Holding it, and then
Right.
the next up
And by the way, the same thing, in the same, just as it is with people, it's also with Hashem. Meaning that this we've talked about in great detail, but that the main place, that's why the symbol here is Yaakov being hurt by Esav's archangel, which is the Yetzer Hara, which is the evil inclination, which is the Malach HaMavet, all these things. When is he hit? He's hit at the end. Like the Baal Shem Tov said, when does the Yetzer Hara hit you? When does your Nefesh Behemoth hit you? When does your ego hit you? It hits you after you've completed something. It won't, put its foot out to make you trip on the way to the mitzvah, and it won't stop you from doing the mitzvah. It'll only want and claim what it needs when you come back. Exactly like Yaakov. When did he catch him? After Yaakov finished doing everything, he went to look for these small vessels, and he had crossed the river the second time. He had finished everything. Then, when he's all alone, that's when he gets him. And he's on the way back. He's finished everything that he needs. Why? Because it's that fishing for acknowledgement. It's that fishing for Hashem telling me, patting me on the back and telling me, oh, you did a good thing. Or, even more than that, I would expect him to give me some kind of reward. You could say that the whole essence of life in this world is to be able to work without seeing the reward. That's what builds you in this world. It's the essence of work here. And if you take that as being the challenge, and you focus on it, most people go through life not knowing this. They never heard that schal mitzvah b'hai al maleika, that there's no reward for a mitzvah, whether it's a mitzvah between you and Hashem, between you and another person in this world. Not that Hashem doesn't give you all the time, He gives without end, but it's not in exchange for what you've done. He gives you infinitely more than what you've done. Also, no, there's a few places that it says that if you do this and this, you can get a lichut yamin. Yeah, and then we have the story in the Gemara that. So that's challenged by Chazal. How do we understand those psukim exactly? But in any case, just to understand this, that this is the essence of, in a certain sense, this is the essence of what it means to be alive, what it means to function and be in the world and to develop ourselves. It means to develop ourselves in spite of the fact that you don't see the acknowledgement, you don't see the reward. You have to supply the acknowledgement to yourself. You have to give it to yourself. In Hebrew they say, Yalelcha zar, right? The pasuk in Mishlei says, Yalelcha zar velo picha, that others should praise you and not yourself. So to laugh at it in Hebrew, and it's not such a big, it's not just so facetious. There's something true about it. Yalelcha zar, it should be others who praise me. Velo, and if there's nobody to praise me, picha, you shouldn't praise yourself. Really, it doesn't mean that you praise yourself. You understand that that's the meaning of what it means to be in the world. You don't have to praise yourself for it. You just take it as I've achieved what it means to be a human being in the world. I've done without regard for whether I receive a
So that much you're
reward or
allowed
not.
to take credit for without giving it to Hashem, because we do have to do that. Hashem can't do that for us. And
Right.
We have to, that's the only credit we can claim.
Right.
How do we encourage our children to be proactive in a positive way without giving them this, feeding this in them?
Right, so we said, my advice, I don't know if it's still good, but it was good 5 years ago, and it's still old, I still do it with my kids, is that I praise the action, not the result, and certainly not, over the past few years, I think I've grown a little soft here, and I think I do give more acknowledgement to the action than I used to, but it's still just to the action. not to
So
the.
why is it softer, going softer?
It used to only be verbal. Today, I think I do more than just verbal
But that's good,
acknowledgement.
that's not.
So maybe it is, maybe it's not. I don't
No?
know. I don't. No, it's just saying. Could be that it's better to just leave it as verbal acknowledgement.
Oh,
I have one son who really impresses me all the time, and I keep telling him I don't care what grades you get. What I'm impressed by is how much you study, and he's got this Zeitzfleisch. And I'm not impressed with the fact that he has ability to sit and study, because I think that's inborn in him. What I'm more impressed by is that he does it really when he doesn't want to do it. Like I see that he doesn't want to do it, and then he sits down. That minute, that transfer between I'd rather go and play basketball or whatever it is, and his sitting down, and once he sits down, he gets lost in it. So that I'm not so impressed by, but I am impressed by the fact that he's able to make that transition. And I tell him every time, I didn't think that Motzei Shabbos is the worst time, especially in the summer. Motzei Shabbos, he starts at 10, and because they have a Gemara test every Sunday. So he learns during Shabbos, but then, Motzei Shabbos, he wants to goof off with his brothers and play and whatever. And then he catches himself and he says, no, I'm going to review again. And when he does that, I always I'm very impressed. I can't do that. I'm not able to do those things. I was never able to. Anyway, somebody said, who I think Simon Jacobson wrote, maybe Y.Y. Jacobson, I remember. Why do we procrastinate? So if you ask a procrastinator why he procrastinates, what's his answer? Can I give you an answer? How early do you need an answer? I'm like that. One of those. Anyway. Okay. So now going into marriage with words of gratitude, and here again, this is the rectification of acknowledgement of Hod. So the same things hold. On the one hand, I can't go fishing for gratitude and acknowledgement. The relationship has to be built in such a way that I can only give it and not demand it. Right? I can give it to my spouse, to my wife, but I can't claim it. Even though I catch myself sometimes doing it, but it's a sign, even in marriage, it's a sign of weakness. That as much as we would like to hope that we can share all our weaknesses when we're married, the simple truth is that you can't. It's one of the big shocks that people have in marriage. That weakness is not greeted by understanding necessarily. You would think, this is sort of like the picture that people have before they get married, is that when I get married there will be somebody who will accept me no matter what. No. You know what? Even parents, after a certain age, or even very early on, find it very difficult to accept everything, no matter what. So really that doesn't exist in life. The only one who accepts you no matter what is Hashem, but that doesn't help you very much because you don't see the fact that you're breathing as an acceptance. You sort of see it as an entitlement. In fact, sharing weaknesses is not a good thing. This is also very surprising. Like, why would you not be able to share weaknesses?
You say with your spouse.
Yeah.
Threatens them.
It doesn't build you.
Sorry?
It doesn't build you or him.
Right.
You share it. It does the opposite.
There's a whole thing about what we might discuss this some other time, about whether you can or should share. When I'm saying weaknesses, I'm not necessarily talking about a general idea, but more particular acts. Should you share the averos that you do? Should you tell?
The Tzedel Cotton says that no.
Well, what?
The Tzedel Cotton says
Okay.
share, but not
Right.
everyone.
That's the one thing you can't share.
You mean don't tell them?
You can.
Oy.
it's a very it's a very tricky subject, because you feel it should be somebody that I trust so much that no matter what I tell them, it should be okay. But it doesn't work like that. It's strangely enough, even when it comes to yourself. Okay, even when it comes to yourself, the Tanya says, limit it. The acknowledgement of the failings, limit it to a very short period during the day when you can handle it. But don't constantly beat yourself up over those things. That's what we talk about. Havdalah. Havdalah is exactly that ability to ignore the negative.
And if a person has sinned, he can ignore it.
So he has to do tshuva.
David HaMelech said,
Okay, he has to do tshuva. From David HaMelech, we know that you do it at night, because that's when he used to do it. That's when he used to do it.
din.
Yeah, right. There's dinim in the world anyway, but this is a very big deal. That we talk about this a lot.
Do it at
That
night
really,
when your spouse is sleeping.
when you're half asleep, it's even better. Do it at night because there's nothing you have to go out and because it weakens a person. There's no question that it weakens them. And really, they used to do something very important. That after they did this, they would say Tikkun Chatzot. And when you say Tikkun, really that's from David HaMelech. And when you say Tikkun Chatzot, what you're saying in the end is that I'm not here as a free agent. I'm here as part of a bigger scheme of things. And in the end, the Averas that I did, it's not that I'm carrying it by myself. It's the whole world's burden. Meaning that I've contributed, like people feel today about a carbon footprint or something like that, right? I haven't recycled enough or something like that. I'm causing global warming, whatever. You have a feeling that this is not just something personal, it's being carried by everybody. There are consequences that are being carried by everybody, and that sort of takes a little bit of the weight off of yourself, because what's more important, the damage you did to everybody or the damage you did to yourself? Obviously, you look at it in a different perspective when you realize that it's affected more than just yourself. When it comes to revealing particular averos, it's simply it's exactly caving into the evil inclination, because that's what he wants. He wants you to see yourself as something very low and incapable, and in fact, that's just another side of the ego, because really it allows you to lament your situation in life, and that quickly becomes, by the way, that's the meaning of Tammuz, the month that we're now in, is lamenting, right? Just feeling sorry for somebody else, for yourself. It's these fake tears. That really you're not lamenting anything, you're just sort of crying because, oh, if you cry, you'll feel better. Why will you feel better if you cry? Because, oh, poor me, oh, okay, that makes you feel better because it's a lot about me. I give myself important weight. So this is a very important thing, that you don't share the weaknesses. You can share the weaknesses in general, but even then, you have to be careful about exactly what you share.
Counseling, they share.
When you get to counseling, so it's not just. Sometimes those weaknesses will come out because you're already discussing a lot of things that are being brought up. But in a healthy relationship, there doesn't have to be a full disclosure about everything that's wrong with me. And by the way, this is one of the, not long ago I had a young man who has a particular problem, and he feels that it's an addiction, and I don't think it is. I worked hard on trying to convince him that he doesn't have an addiction, but he needed it. You saw it. Like, the person needs to feel addicted, because that gives him legitimacy for everything that he does, because I'm addicted, so I can't possibly, whatever it was, it doesn't matter. And he's not married, and he very much wants to get married, or at least he thinks he wants to get married. And the result was that he met somebody, and right away he wanted to tell her about his addiction. So I try, because this was I tried to explain to him in so many words that really what you want to do is you want to get from her what you've already taken for yourself, right? How are you taking it for yourself? You're allowed yourself to act the way you do because you claim it's an addiction. And now you really want her stamp that it's okay to be that way because it's an addiction. So if she confers and she acknowledges it, so now you've got, so that's not marriage. That's not going to be anything like what you need. But in a sense, that's exactly what happens. That when you share a weakness, a lot of times, what you're looking for is exactly that, somebody to ingratiate you, right? To allow you to be weak. And I know that it's not comfortable to live in a place where there are expectations from you. But it's much better than to live in a place where there are no expectations from you. It's infinitely better. Meaning that if you share this weakness and you expect there to be acknowledgement, what you're setting yourself up for is never being able to overcome it. But if you don't share it, and you know that your spouse or whoever else is around you expects something different from you, so now you have to live up to that. And I know it's not comfortable, it's not easy. But it's a much better life than the opposite. Because if you're only fishing, again, for this acknowledgement here is like giving you a legitimacy to be the wrong way that you are. Right? Without getting too much into this, but there's a lot of movements today in the world that's what they do. They try to, the more we'll externalize our problems, and the more we demand that you accept our problems, the more we feel legitimate. But exactly that prevents any chance of you having a good life. You're like tearing the ground from under your feet or tearing your feet off. That's really what it means. Okay, anyway, so it doesn't mean that when you get married that all the weaknesses are now on the table and everything's okay. You hear this a lot with people that have overcome tremendous difficulty, that they wouldn't share it with others that they had a problem. I remember there was when I was growing up in high school, there was a friend of mine who had a very serious disease. But it was one that he couldn't hide, and he did an incredible job. I only heard that he was sick, that he had been sick all the years we'd been together, probably about 8 years after we graduated from high school. And I'm shocked. How could he have hidden this? Like, this is not something easy to work with. But he wouldn't let anybody know. He didn't want anybody to know. Even the teachers didn't know. He didn't want any special treatment, nothing at all. And he ended up being able to do things that nobody with this disease that I know of has been able to. I mean, because he fought very hard not to be treated differently. Even though it took a tremendous toll on him. Today I know what it is and like what it does to a person. But he suffered quietly. And it's not it's not even a psychological thing, it's a physical thing. It's something that you carry around all the time, tremendous difficulty. And the fact that a lot of handicapped people will tell you they don't want to be treated any differently. Why? Because if I'm treated differently, I lower my expectations from myself. They know that they've got to hold themselves. So the truth is, it's better to hold yourself than to reveal and to expect understanding. Because people will understand, but that's not what you want. It's a very hard thing to say. It's a much harder thing to actually enact and do, but it's 1,000 times better than the other option. The moment that you start telling everybody this is what I have, that's when you'll stop reaching for something beyond what you think you can do. So the same thing holds in marriage. You can't tell everything. There's no point in telling everything. It doesn't do any good. Of course, there are some people who think that what they're telling is not a problem, so so they share it and whatever. So that's a different issue. But if you know that something is a problem, they're now aware that this is a weakness. They think that this is just okay. So, where does the gratitude come in actively? It comes from the one giving the gratitude. There it should be very active. And as opposed to children, where you can undermine them by telling them how great it was that they did this or they did that, right? What a beautiful drawing. Again, acknowledging the result and not the act. When it comes to a spouse, it's not true. It's not the same thing. And the gratitude can be for the result, and not just for the act. And you can give praise not for the fact that you prepared a meal, but you prepared a delicious meal. And I can give praise for the actual result, not for the effort involved in it.
Don't you want to do both?
I want to do both. That's what I'm saying. When it comes to children, I don't want to do both, because I'll undermine them. I'll convince them that they do the best thing in the world, which they don't, right? I've got this child that just drew a house. I tell them that's the most beautiful house I've ever seen. So first of all, I'm lying. Secondly, I'm convincing them that there's something that they're not. So I'm making them into a lie. I'm making them believe the lie that I don't believe anyway.
So is this because with your child, you're building their independence or giving them independence? I mean, maybe both. And it's not what you're doing in this house.
Right.
You want to build unity. Even.
Not just unity.
Or
It's
there
just
is
water.
unity.
Was it just water?
It's not really what I'm thinking, what I just said.
Think about it some more. Say it better.
Losing.
What's the difference between a child's independence and a spouse's
I don't need to give
independence?
my husband his independence.
Meaning?
Well, he has it.
Keep going. A little bit more.
I think if they're working on becoming a better person, this is helpful in that process. That's for sure. You're not going to say, I benefit in the long run anyway, which is true, but that doesn't work with our courses.
Okay.
But that's true anyway.
You benefit in the long run. Who does?
Oh, by giving gratitude, absolutely.
Okay.
You don't think so? You wouldn't agree?
No, of course I agree.
It's educated, you can do it after.
What do you
learn
mean?
to do it.
Oh, you're teaching him, you're saying, when
No,
you do it?
You're not teaching. The fact that you do it with a good heart will somehow it will become a new concept maybe by him, and he will try to do the same thing. Not the same way, but in his own way. But
She's saying that by you giving gratitude, maybe you teach the other side to also give gratitude.
That's such a great idea to have in mind.
no, but not
Because then you're giving gratitude for.
not
To yourself.
No, you have an ulterior motive for the
An agenda.
gratitude, right? And that's probably going to backfire.
Well, if for the kids you want to give them the independence, then what do you want to do? You want to stabilize. Marriage is very different. I mean, if you're two halves of one whole.
Mm-hmm. Keep going.
Want to lift both of you up? I don't know. Meet
Okay.
at, well, if we're meeting at a certain point. more time to think about it, temporary life.
Yeah, no,
No,
It
give us
needs-
the answer. Might tell us what you're thinking.
They give you a answer. I don't know
Yeah.
about the answer. With a child, the end result is, it has to do with independence. Is that they shouldn't need me. Right? They shouldn't need me to give them their footing, like their self-assurance, their self-confidence. It should become something that they have independently of me being there or not, because that's the whole point of raising a child. You want them to be independent.
Because you strengthen his quality.
Okay, you strengthen his ability to do. You strengthen their ability to act. But when it comes to life as a married couple, you sort of said this. We have no intent of doing things independently. Really, the thing we'd like to do the most is do something together. The highest level that we could do is if we could work in the same place doing the same thing. That would be the highest level of cooperation. So there's no reason for me to want you to be to stand on your own in some way, like that I'm taking it away if I give you all the praise. I can give you all the praise. In short, I learned it from Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman has a story that is called the Chacham and the Tam. And every time that he makes something for himself, even he's a cobbler, so he makes shoes. And every time that his wife makes something, he praises it. He doesn't praise the act, he praises the result. He says, Tmimut. Tmimut is the inner quality of Hod. It's the inner quality of acknowledgement. Is to, not to say this is the best, right? To say this is the best house I've ever seen. No, it's to say this is a great house. You drew a great house, let's say if I was talking about. You made really good food. I'm not saying this is the best. I'm not telling you nobody else makes anything like this. That's already facetious. That's not true. But this is good. And I love this. This is something that I love. And I take a great enjoyment in it. That is a different, that's what he does all the time. He makes a shoe, and his shoe is a triangle. It doesn't even look like a shoe. But he says, but I love this shoe. This is a great shoe.
What's that word you used, the inner quality of Hod as well?
Tmimut. Tmimut really it means sincerity or earnestness. To be earnest means, sometimes they translate it in Yiddish as seriousness, to be serious. You have to be able to say with seriousness, this is great, I love it. By the way, even with children, that's not such a terrible thing to say. But to say, this is the best house I've ever seen, that's not true. But to say, this is a great house you drew, that's not so terrible. Because it is great.
In addition of I love it.
I love it. Okay, I love it.
That works that way.
Okay, I love it.
But you can specific salad
Okay, okay.
That's
So-
the
But it's not the best. So that, to get down to that resolution, that this is not just, I'm not just acknowledging, I'm not just grateful, but I'm grateful because this was great for me. That's the important
So
part.
that's what you're doing. You're acknowledging the unity.
Right, exactly.
That's what it is.
Right. I'm strengthening the bond. We work well
I-
together.
You made this, and you
Right.
know I like it. I love it.
Right,
Okay.
and it works well.
Strengthen the
So you're strengthening, really, that's the answer here. I'm strengthening the bond, that there's no interest. I'm not interested in you opening a restaurant. That's not the point. You could say that, but that misses the point even. Is it a compliment to tell somebody, look, you cook so well, you should really open a restaurant? I don't know, whenever anybody says something like that to me, like they say to me,
Yeah, they
I'll
don't
give you an
know,
example.
they don't know what's involved.
I'll give you an example. I remember this. We were a lot of years ago. We were fundraising for something, And I had a partner who went around also, and they came to this very wealthy doctor, and he started saying, "Wow, this is a really great project. You should have no problem fundraising for this." So when I heard that, so obviously he's not going to give anything. Because it's great for everybody else. If you tell me you cook so well, should open a restaurant, I mean, for me that's a deflection. You're deflecting. What do you mean I should cook for everybody else? It's not good for you? You don't feel that? You don't love it? You want me to waste my time with other people? You don't want me? If there's something that's that good, why would I send you out into the world and tell you go? You'll make tons of money with this thing. I want it for myself. Okay, it's a very simple thing. It's a great project. You have no problem fundraising as much as you need. Of course, it means that I'm not interested. Because if I was interested, why am I sending you outside? Why am I telling you about how many people would enjoy it on the outside? It's a deflection. So that's why it's important to say, no, this is, for me, this is a tremendous thing. This is all I could hope for. Really. I don't need anything more.
And for kids, you do want to bond with them, but not over independence.
Right, but not too much. Not too much.
Too much.
The younger they are, you can still do it. The older they get, they're not going to want it anyway. But
I feel like I missed an awful lot.
yeah, so everybody does. It's not a big deal. Everybody, all the generations were like this, so there's nothing new. Anyway, so this now again, you can only do it for the other side. You can't demand it. But in marital counseling, it becomes a very big issue. If you come to a couple that has problems, so this is the Achilles heel. This is the Gida Nashe, right, in Hebrew. The Gida Nashe is the inability to give, to acknowledge and give things where it's due.
So you counsel them.
In this thing, you have to counsel them separately, but it's without fail something that's missing, always. I've never seen it not missing. It's missing anyway, but it's so weak in most people, this inability to give thanks for what they receive. Because in the same way that you feel that not getting it makes you weak, so you sort of build this exterior, I don't need it, and needing it is a sign of weakness.
So if I don't need it, I don't want to give it?
Right, so I don't want somebody else to...
That sounds masculine next to me.
The same thing by women, I think, also. Even though women are more easily prone to giving thanks, but not that much. Not much more, I don't think so. Most people don't...
What about the opposite? What about apologizing?
Apologizing is the other side of this. Right?
That right. Why would someone apologize?
To apologize...
I don't need an apology, so they don't need an apology? They're as good as I am? They're as big as I am? I don't need
No,
an
because it's
apology.
admitting that you're wrong. You just don't want to admit that you're wrong, that you did something wrong. That's why people don't want to apologize. But to give praise, people don't want to feel weakness. And to give praise is like to say, I needed what you gave me or something like that. It also makes me indebted, supposedly.
Are you indebted being married?
Yes, that's why...
But it's acknowledging being
It's acknowledging to yourself that I'm indebted. And that's the difficult part, I think. It's a sign of
And is
weakness.
there a way for a spouse to work on that with their spouse without addressing it directly? If they don't want to, they've addressed it directly.
It's
not
very
like-
easily done if you just learn this chapter. Just learn this chapter and talk about it. That's it. You have to do it with something neutral or something objective.
You need a third person.
The third person can be a book,
Can
that's
be
what I'm
a
saying. You don't have to do it like just one-on-one. In fact, from what I've seen, it doesn't really work one-on-one.
No. that's-
You have to have
No,
something
they
else in
can say
between.
that. They can say, I don't want to. Please, why don't you want to? It goes nowhere.
Okay. So now let's go a little bit deeper into this. The first time that Hashem praised something. So to praise is to say more of Vayar Elokim Ta'ol Ki Tov. It's more that he saw that it was good, but to actually praise something, that's, where does Hashem praise? Who can think of even a place where Hashem praises somebody? So with Avram it's pretty clear, he says it, but there's a place much earlier. By Avram he said, Ki yadati leman asher etzaveh et banav et beito acharav, because I know that he will command his household and his children after him and so on. But that he's God-fearing and will give all those qualities to his offspring. But the first time that to praise there's another word in Hebrew that it'll help you find it. You don't have to say Lagid Todah, you can also say Leverech, right? So what bracha did he give on the third day? Again, it's just that it's not a bracha. No, earlier.
Yom Shlishi, Kitov.
No, but Kitov is just, again, his assessment. He's not praising it. He's not giving a bracha. When did he give a bracha the first time? Who did he say that first to?
Animals,
Which ones?
the fish,
The fish. What day was that?
Thursday.
The fifth day. So this is exactly what we're talking about. It's the fifth midah is acknowledgement. It's hod. So we learn it even from the creation of the world, that the first time that Hashem praises is on the fifth day, and the 7 days they correspond to the midot. So the fifth day is hod. It's acknowledgement. It's exactly the act. So the interesting thing to ask is, why didn't he praise the sun and moon? Why doesn't he praise the vegetation?
Because they're not
See?
organic, they're
Almost. They're organic.
They're not-
Vegetation's organic. What does it lack?
life.
Rain, tefillah,
Fish don't do
What does it lack? So is one thing that they have. They have some degree of consciousness.
fish.
They can recognize it. They can recognize the fact that they've been blessed.
Oh, really?
It's a very low level of consciousness, but it's higher than anything that's inanimate, like the sun and moon, or even something from the vegetable kingdom, which is on the third day. So you have to have life in the sense of living beings that have some level of consciousness. And the amazing thing is that this is the deep meaning. There's a Gemara that says,
So Hashem Baruch Hu praised down for the rain to get rain, right? That you praise him for the rain to come. It's the whole.
he needed praise. Why do you say that? Just to remind me.
Get back to you on the source.
I don't remember. No, but what do you remember? I don't remember the.
That's what it says. I don't know if it's a Gemara.
He needed to hear something good about himself,
Yeah.
about his Torah.
Hashem Baruch Hu needed praise
Good,
for the
good.
rain to come.
And Shimon Bar Yochai, he's the Hod of Hod. He's mamash the. So, in any case, getting back to there's a Gemara that says that when you give something, you give a present to a little child, you have to tell his mother. Okay? You have to let his mother know that you gave him a present. Why? So the idea is that a little child can't acknowledge yet. Meaning he doesn't have the reflective ability to understand that he's been given a present. Or even if he's been given a present, little child is probably until about age 8, 9. They don't remember, they can't acknowledge having received it. And so, for instance, very external reason would be that a lot of times you find little kids walking around with something, and you say, "So where did you take
I
that
have
from?
no idea.
You took it from somewhere, right?" I find my 6-year-old walking around with 100 shekel. Where did you get that? I've had it forever. I didn't take it from anywhere. They don't remember it. Like, it doesn't sit in their consciousness that they received anything. So the external reason would be because it's called metziat katan kova ligneva, that gzela, that something that a small child finds is usually close to being stealing. It's very close to it because they can't tell the difference between something that's hefker that somebody doesn't want anymore. It's just
fish has more consciousness than a 9-year-old.
no, hold on, no. He recognizes, even a 9-year-old kid understands at some level that he received it, but it gets lost.
But
They
the fish
don't.
doesn't lose it?
The fish
Okay,
also
hung up
loses
on
it.
this.
The fish also loses it. We'll see in a moment where it goes.
Okay.
So the acknowledgement has to go to the mother. So first of all, that she knows that this was given as a present. It's not that he took it. That's a simple reason. But the more pnimi reason is that the mother is what gives you birth, what gives birth to you. It's like where you stand in the world. Like we said, that to have a feeling of purpose and of a place in the world and so on. The mother is also place. It's makom. The womb is like the space that you start from.
Like the name of Hashem.
What?
Like the name of Hashem, Hamakom.
Okay, the makom. The makom is the name associated with the ima. So all this, it goes back to that faculty of understanding of bina in the person that gives the person the space to stand. For the fish, it wouldn't be the particular fish. He doesn't know or it doesn't know, it doesn't not know. We'd be talking about the call it like the collective consciousness of the fish that gives them space, which doesn't exist in vegetation or certainly not in inanimate objects. But there's some level of collective consciousness that they have.
You mean that they swim around in schools and they...
That's what you see, birds and fish. The interesting thing about them is that they swarm. It's a very it's something that you don't see. You don't see this type of activity in vegetation. There's no ability for vegetation to move around, so you can't see that type of activity. It might exist at some level.
It grows collectively.
No, algae is not moving
That's-
voluntarily. It's not willingly moving. It's moving because of the current, so it moves together. But when you're talking about fish moving, you see that they're looking at one another. I don't know who decides in the end where we're going, but they move all together. And you see the birds do the same thing. They've got this swarming habit that is a big deal today in computer science. Like how do you build swarms? But ants do the same thing. There's they have this collective consciousness. Right, it's like a colony. So there you would say it's going back higher. If you're talking about like a lower animal, so no, yeah, I could definitely say that a 3-year-old dog has more consciousness than an 8-year-old kid. Yes, he knows. Even the prophet says this. He says, "Yada shol koneo v'chamor evus ba'ala v'ami lo yada kono." That the donkey knows who feeds it, and the ox knows who gives it water in its trough. But my people, they don't know me. That's how Yirmiyahu starts his book. He says they don't know me. They don't recognize where it's coming from. They don't acknowledge where they're receiving things from. So you can even be an adult that's like that. But the idea is that with a child, the acknowledgement there is even of simple things that he receives. It doesn't always know. So you have to tell his mother. So what this really teaches is the acknowledgement is the end of what gives me a place in the world. It's what gives me purpose in my life. What gives me a place to stand, if you want. Okay?
This must be related to praising Hashem,
Okay.
strengthening our unity, so to speak.
Okay. Another thing that's related to it is hod. The word itself, acknowledgement, comes from the word head, which means an echo. So really, when you can think of it like this, that it's like a phrase that's said a lot, Ashrei Oladeto. That when you want to praise somebody, what do you say? blessed is the lot of the one who gave birth to him. You don't bless him. Ashrei Yoladeto. That his mother, her whole meaning in bringing him into the world was that you do something good. She deserves the praise for that. Okay? She's what builds his space in the world. So you echo, like the end result of giving birth is to echo the gratefulness, the acknowledgement back to the mother. So what does this mean in marriage? What is the mother doing where's the mother in marriage? You have a couple, where's the mother?
You know?
We're quiet.
No.
No, so the wife.
The wife. You don't have to go to the mother-in-law or to the wife's mother. This awakens.
Many women will say, I don't want to be his mother.
Right?
Yes, I was
Right.
just thinking.
So it's interesting. I don't know if they're listening now. I had a conversation with somebody, with a couple last night, and she said she's not into being a motherly figure for her husband. Exactly what you just said. And I said, what do you mean by that? What do you mean you're not into being a motherly figure? Meaning you don't change his diapers? What do you mean?
Not yet.
You don't want to take care of his nose. That's not being a mother for an adult. That's being.
Telling him what to
You don't right. You don't want to have to tell him what to do. What does it mean to be a mother for an adult?
They don't want to hear it either.
What does it mean? I say
Remind you.
there's there's an incredible thing that I didn't know this until recently, but apparently the Rebbe every afternoon at 12 or something like that, he'd go to visit when his mother was still alive. He'd go to visit her for half an hour every single day.
Oh, gosh.
And he once expressed, like after she passed away, he once told somebody who was angry at their mother that how can you be angry at your mother? I also had a mother once, and there's no price in the world I wouldn't pay to spend another half hour with her. Like, so what did she give him? Why? I mean, you can say he's a very rectified man himself, but you can look at it. What? What?
He's her child.
He's still her child. What did she do
Give him a place.
that
birth to him.
she what?
She gave birth to him.
So
So she gave him his place, and he wouldn't have that without her.
Without her.
And he's giving her gratitude by being there, I guess.
so what? So but he spent half an hour every day doing something with her. It says that he used to get her advice on a lot of things. So he would talk to her, wouldn't just sit there and pour her tea. He'd do something. So what does a grown mother give to an adult child? What can she
Wisdom,
give?
Wisdom.
It's not exactly wisdom, understanding. But what do we mean by understanding?
He speaks, she listens, and she gives back.
So what are you supposed to give back? What gives back space? You're right. What would give space?
Maybe it's just holding the space for him to whatever he needs or wants in that half hour. In that day.
When you teach a child to walk, what do you give them?
I know. You witness.
Encouragement.
You witness.
Encouragement. That's what it means to give space. It's to not be afraid of falling down.
Remember
Right.
his mother for encouragement?
I think she was the only person that, except for his wife, that gave him encouragement. Encouragement is not exactly here.
No question.
I don't think it's like, oh, I had a really tough day today. What do we do? Because we're talking about the Rebbe. But the encouragement would be like, I trust that you'll find a solution to this, and I trust that you'll be able to figure out how to switch this into something positive. At his level, it wasn't like how to encourage him. I don't want to get out of bed in the morning. But for us, that is what it is, right? It is.
An adult should want to go to their mother for this? As they
So, for a wife to be a motherly figure is to give encouragement. Is that I trust you that what you're doing is right for us. Okay?
So then what's the role?
That's giving the space. Same thing. There's no difference. I trust that you can build your home. I trust that you can have a good family and so on. She looks at it from the one who is from the previous generation, which is so difficult for people to do. It's one of the most difficult things to do
As a parent of an adult.
as a parent of an adult.
Yeah, it's not done well very often.
It's not done at all almost. But you have to understand that that's what makes somebody into a Rebbe, and that's what makes the rest of us into.
Well, we don't want everyone to be a Rebbe.
No, the Rebbe
Not
did.
healthy adults is a good
The
start.
Rebbe did. He wanted every shaliach to be a Rebbe.
Uh-huh.
No, you should have that.
Okay.
And that trust in somebody else, what do we call it? Because this is really what Hod is. It's passive confidence. It's putting trust in somebody else that they can do the right thing. And again, think of why are you so certain that the child will learn how to walk, and you don't just think that they'll keep falling forever. Why? Because you know,
Other people walk.
because you can, because you know that that's the end of it. The end always is that they walk. Take longer, take shorter, whatever it is. But Chaz v'shalom, if the child is handicapped, you still have that. Then you have to work on it. But that's exactly what you still have to give. That's what it means to be motherly. And it's to give the encouragement, to give the space without the criticism. Not to say you can't. That's the main thing. But I believe that you can.
There's distance between those two statements.
Huge distance.
Okay.
But not to even say,
You need to work on yourself. You need to teach it. You need to first believe.
you have to believe yourself. Exactly. Right? That belief, it comes from the mother. That's the role of the mother in the relationship. It's to provide
You need
faith.
to believe in everything. What if you don't? What if you don't? And you have to-
Why don't you? So that's the question. Why don't you? Do you believe that your children is like
No,
almost?
research and projects.
let's say-
Everything needs encouragement. You're not on board with every single project. You need to be. Of course you need to be. What do you do if you're not?
I'll make it very personal. Like when you have a teenager and they don't get up in the morning, right? Drives you nuts. So the role of the father is sort of like to explain very intellectually why it's such an important thing.
So it's non-fiasco.
You don't always have to say it on the spot. You can do it maybe in the evening, whatever it is. But to give the encouragement is more intellectual. It's like let's go through what a life look like if you don't learn how to get up. Everybody's, just explain, everybody's tired in the morning. Nobody feels like getting up. Everybody would rather sleep in bed. The truth is, even if you do sleep in bed until noon, it doesn't help anything. You'll be even more tired when you wake up, and so on. All the intellectual arguments in the world explaining the repercussions, what will happen, and so on and so forth. The mother's role is simpler in a certain sense. It's that I believe that you can do this. It's to give that
Yes.
support.
What if they don't want to do it?
They don't, but I believe that you can. And nobody wants to. There's no question nobody wants to, except for very unique individuals.
Yeah, everybody says she's gullible.
She's gullible. A lot of times that's what faith is.
Yeah.
Is being gullible. But it's not just being gullible. First of all, every indication says that in the end everything works out. Every indication. The only problem you have is right now it doesn't look so good. But that's what's called Ke'ish asher tenachamenu imo. That only a mother knows how to give nechama. Nechama is not necessarily that I can console you for something negative that happened. Lenachem is to give nachat. Right? The mother is mitinut. It's that there's time. This will work out. You don't have to give all the arguments in the world why. That you can leave to the father. And also the sense of urgency can come from the father. Should come from the father. He's the zrizut, he's the urgency. But the mother, the emunah there is more from, I'll give you an example where all women go through this at some level. with breastfeeding. That's one of the things that requires letting go and trusting that in the end, this is one of the things that's where it starts really, because there you think it's you, okay? You think it's you, and the strange thing is, right? People get into this very difficult cycle that they can't break out of. If the baby doesn't suckle, there's no milk. But if there's no milk, the baby doesn't suckle. So what do? So people play all kinds of games trying to increase the milk flow and try and do this and try and do that. So that but in the end, it only depends on one thing. It's your faith that it'll work out. That you have to relax. You have to completely relax and let it come as it comes. And that, you can't get a man to do that. That'll never work. Because with the man, it's a sense of urgency. What, he didn't eat today? He's going to dry out and die. No, he's not going to dry out. He's not going to die. Nothing's going to happen. But the men do this. They take the sense of urgency and they throw it at the women. And suddenly the women, they lose their perspective. And the main thing that they can give is a sense of faith, belief of metinut. How do you say metinut? Of things going slowly. Okay? But they'll go. They eventually reach their destination. It takes time. It's the whole thing. It takes 9 months. You have to be patient. It doesn't happen in 2 minutes.
So what is it, a bracha of Parnassa comes actually through the wife? They say that.
Because she has the faith that it'll happen.
She has the
Parnassa also takes time, by the way.
Yes, no, but what
Very
do you
interesting.
mean?
Especially today. I mean, but any business that you want to start, you have to have patience.
Yes.
Because the first 1, 2, 3, 10 years, who knows? You're struggling. Really, the Gemara says 5 years. Don't do more than 5 years. If you don't see a sign of bracha after 5 years, you should probably be pursuing something
Maybe
else.
you see a sign, so you're getting another 5 years.
No, it can't, but a sign that you really see that this has worked. Even with all the speed that stuff goes on, today with the internet and electronic commerce, still things take time. Okay, and today you'd probably say 5 months, but still it takes time. It doesn't happen right away.
There's a story on the internet about, I don't know if it's true, you know that Thomas Edison?
Yeah, he says that 3,000 things he tried before he came
No,
to
but
the
he came
filament.
home with a note from school that holding his mother.
Yeah, it's a famous story. I don't know if it's true.
Oh,
It's a cool story though.
yeah.
And-
instead of telling him what it
right,
said, she
right,
made
right,
it up.
right.
And said, "You're great."
Why? Because
That's what a mother should do. It's a good.
So that's what it means to be a mother to an adult. Also, same thing. It's the encouragement, which doesn't even have to necessarily be said in words, as much as it has to be said in patience. Metinut is really, in a certain sense, it's like patience.
It's like a minute.
No. Matun is like somebody who's very patient. He's very, okay. So I think we'll end here, even though, isn't he coming? Isn't he?
I told him you were going.
Oh, okay. So we have a few more words.
How does
Okay.
it get to you?
No, he has a car. Okay, so let's still do something more. Okay, so we said that you really, this is something to learn together. You should get the couple either to learn it together or talk to them about it separately. But this thing of giving thanks is really the end of all speech. It's really the purpose.
Which is?
Giving thanks. It's also connected, again, no, so what we said here, it's even more than that. That Hod is the end of Binah, it's the end of understanding. Again, and that's as far as understanding extends, and what it's trying to say is that that's where it gets its, in the end, it's where it's strongest. Like, where if it works, the strongest expression.
Speech aspect of Malchut, bringing it all the way down.
Not Malchut. We were talking about Hod.
Yes, but ultimately through the speech.
So we'll see in a moment. Okay, it has to be through speech. Speech is Malchut in general,
Yeah, that's what
but that's so we're here talking about all the different aspects of of speech, you could say, which would be like all the different aspects of malchut in a certain sense. Okay. So let's now get into something more. I have to say this. These two abilities to work together, which is what we talked about last week, cooperation, and we called it control, but really it's more like orchestrating things and giving thanks and being grateful. They're netzach and hod together, and in the end, that's where prophecy comes from. So when you talk about these two, here prophecy would be like awakening the prophetic element in marriage. So what is a prophetic element in marriage? What is prophecy in general is a good question. But really what it means is to be inspired from above in what needs to be done. Okay, in what needs to be done. And what actually needs to be done. Okay. It's sort of like that when you develop these two aspects, you have a better indication of where you need to go in life. Okay. Right. Okay. You begin to feel, apparently in some way, where your life is supposed to be headed. So if you feel like lost, you don't know where you're going as a couple, you don't know where you're going as a family, not clear. So increasing these two is apparently some kind of catalyst for receiving the inspiration. Okay. Now is a very interesting thing. When all of this comes together, really these are all these five aspects of speech. They're not the end. They have to be contained in something. That's the yesod, the foundation. Everything in the end has to go into something, into some kind of vessel. And the vessel is, in this case, the first one, the foundation, is very thin. Thin, I mean that it doesn't contain a lot. It's a very narrow tube that only allows one thing to pass at every moment. Like when you take everything together, we learned about them like theoretically. Okay? Now you actually are talking. How should the talking be? How should the communication be done? So the amazing thing that comes out here is that in the end, this is all included in the vessel that speaks in the end, that actually begins to communicate. And that's the first step in communication is actually the foundation, the yesod.
That's what I was trying to clarify, is it not in Malchut?
Right, we're not in Malchut yet even. We're in the foundation of Malchut. So this may sound a little technical, but it's a key concept that people miss completely. Chazal say, the sages say, Al tarbe sicha im ha'isha. Which to a modern ear sounds like, what are you talking about? That's exactly like what they do in Saudi Arabia, right? They can't drive, so you don't talk to them. Something like that. Like something. Why would they say this?
No, because it's not necessary.
Oh, so they say. That's the explanation Rashi gives on the spot, and a lot of the commentaries say this is in Avos. In the first chapter, it says this. So it says that it has speech in marriage. Has to have a purpose. It can't be without purpose. It's not shooting the wind. Okay. And when you start shooting the wind, as it's called, you just speak for the sake of speaking, it quickly deteriorates. and it doesn't create a bond. It makes things into
Chaos.
not just chaotic, but into wastefulness. There's only so much energy that you have. And when you start just talking without reason, very quickly you begin to expend it on things that you don't need. Sort of like how much money you use, I don't know, something like that. When you start spending frivolously, then you become poor in the end. The speech has to be directed. And the symbol here is the foundation, that only one thing goes through at every moment. It's like a narrow tube that only one bead at a time can go through. And you have to think about what comes first and what comes last. Not to talk about 10 different things at the same time. Okay, this is like an introduction. We're not going to finish it today, obviously. But to think about this, that the first step in actual communication, in communication that that actually is constructive, is to be able to speak about things in an, call it an orderly manner, but almost in a constricted manner. It's not just about everything in the world.
Is this all true with friends?
No, friends, it's a little bit different. But I know that what does it mean to be because husband and wife are supposed to be best friends, so what does that mean? But apparently best friends and friends is not the same thing. The best friends is more than just talking about everything. There's almost, women have this need to talk. So, of course, it should be my husband who talks to me all the time. But it's not necessarily a good recipe for a good marriage, because it can lead to an expectation that simply can't be, it won't happen.
You mean you're expecting him to say more than he can?
You're expecting him to lose himself in order to be able to meet the expectations. We'll need to speak about this more next time. Okay.
Thank you.
It doesn't mean not to discuss important issues.
Yes, no.
Important issues have to be discussed.